Meanwhile, joining us right now, former Secret Service agent and host of the Renegade Republican podcast, Dan Bongino, joins us from down in Florida. Dan, apparently, according to the sheriff yesterday, apparently there's a possibility he had an exit plan. He was going to try to escape. They found a note, not a suicide note, but the sheriff did add he would have had to have been some sort of superhuman or superhero to actually have pulled it off.
Yeah, that seems kind of strange to me. If you're doing a pre-planning, the extensive pre-planning this animal surely did, given all the evidence prior to this attack, it's kind of unusual that he would have an egress plan. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you're on the 32nd floor of a hotel. It's obvious if you're the attacker, they're going to locate the location where you're shooting from. There's really no way out. I mean, just think about this, Steve. There's really only one way out of a hotel room. That's the door. So it's kind of obvious that if he was smart enough to put this plan together, that I don't think, I'm not sure about that. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Dan, authorities say he must have had help. They don't believe that he could have pulled this off on his own. In your experience, what do you think?
You know, again, they have more information than I do, obviously, but candidly speaking, I don't buy that, and I'll tell you why. When you have an accomplice in a crime, especially a crime, again, with such extensive pre-planning as we see here, the accomplice has to add some value to your plan. Well, what value would an accomplice have added? Oh, the weapons were purchased legally. The tannerite they found can be in his home can be purchased legally. Obviously, the planning can be done by himself. The pre-op surveillance, the line of sight, the setup of the line of sight, the setup of the weapons, the carrying in of the weapons. They may have some information that I don't have, obviously, but I don't see where that makes a lot of sense.
Dan, let's talk about the dry run the week before. I thought that might have been one of those stories that goes by the wayside. Instead, it was backed up last week. It was a different concert, different hotel. Do you believe dry run is an accurate description, or do you believe initial target?
No, I think probably a dry run. I think what happened is he probably was looking around vantage point, line of sight, seeing how he could rack up, you know, the greatest amount of body count he could. And maybe he had some line of sight issues at that initial one where there wasn't exactly a clear firing line. But it just seems to make sense that the first plan didn't work out. Maybe he went to a backup plan.
You know what makes me agree with you on that? The girlfriend left on the 25th of September, which was last week. That concert, which the one he might have been scoping out at first, was the weekend before. So it was before he sent her off back to the Philippines. Right.
Oh, my goodness. And by the way, Ainsley, you were absolutely right. Those 16 guns were bought from October 2016 forward. But speaking of guns, Dan, a lot of Democrats are now pushing for more gun controls. And in particular, there's an item today in the New York Times that talks about these bump stocks. You know, we'd never heard of a bump stock before, and I'm pretty familiar with guns. But there are a number of U.S. senators on the Republican side who are open now to a conversation about perhaps banning them. What do you think?
Well, first on the gun control thing, you know, I'm really tired of this. You know, when do my rights come into question? And let me give a pro tip to the Democrats out there. I'm really tired of your crap on this, okay? Stop talking to us like we're a bunch of gun-toting rednecks. Because, you know, I have kids, too. I have two young daughters. You think it doesn't bother me as a dad and a former law enforcement officer, the idea that me or my family could be subjected to one of these savage animals? You know, why are we paying with our rights every time? People like me. It's a tool, Steve. A firearm is a tool. I'm not John J. Rambo.
Absolutely.
I don't love guns. I don't have any love affair with this. It's a darn tool to protect yourself against the evil that some men do in this society. And Democrats lecturing us all the time in late-night comedians with no knowledge of the issue at all about how we're a bunch of violent maniacs because we simply want to protect our families against savages like this is a really dumb strategy to try to convince the other side. Well, wake up.
Well,
let's have a sensible argument about this.
It's actually not. It's worse. They're actually saying you're complicit, blood on your hands for if you're a member of the NRA or a Republican who's against these some of these regulations.
Right. One of them has a hashtag NRA terrorist. Really? Let me get this straight. So the country's sportsmen, fathers, mothers who want to protect their own kids with a tool, a firearm, all of a sudden we're terrorists? You know, wake up. You're not going to convince anybody by this.
Dan, I'm with you. I grew up in a family. My dad's a hunter. He has a lot of guns. My brother, too. And that was common, and that's very common where I grew up.
Right.
I agree with you on
and
that.
We're
but
all of a sudden complicit in this?
But let me ask you about this one, though. The Republicans,
Yeah.
some of the Republicans are getting on board with making those
bump
stops illegal because that
Yeah.
turns a semi-automatic into an automatic, and automatics are illegal anyway. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well,
are you
here's
okay
my-
with that? Yeah.
No, I'm not. And I know it's probably not PC to say that. And I'll tell you why. We're not going to legislate our way out of this, Ainsley. We're just not. What are you going to ban bump stocks? You know what? We have 3D printers. I've got news for you that could create a bump stock in probably under 5 minutes. What are you going to do about that? We can't legislate our way out of the evil in some men's hearts. I'm sorry. There's no way to do that.
Well, do you want in a background check at least that to pop up that you bought 30 guns in a year for the person selling you the gun to say, okay, sir, I just got to ask you, you bought 30 guns in a year. Can you explain to me what you're doing with them? Or do you think that's an infringement?
No, why should I? I don't know. You know what? If I like, if I want to buy 30 guns in a year, why should I have to explain that away to the government? Again, Brian, I'm just going to hit this one point. Why are my rights always under attack because of the acts of a savage madman? I did nothing wrong.
Right.
I'm sorry. You're not going to legislate this thing away. It's just not, doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but do you want to know if someone's going to be forming a militia in the woods as opposed to they are collectors?
Well, Brian, that's two different questions. I mean, a collector of a gun and a guy forming a militia are not necessarily the same thing. I mean, that's completely different. You know, forming a militia in the woods for the purpose of insurrection is a completely different counterintelligence argument than the argument about a background check on a gun.
Absolutely. And of what we know about the shooters so far, no federal laws or gun control laws were broken. Dan, thank you very much for joining us live today.